He was one of America's richest men, Lucas Graham, a billionaire with everything power, fame, and a family name that opened any door. Yet when he closed his own door at night, it was Amara, the woman the world was never allowed to see, who waited for him, his black wife, his hidden love. For 8 long years, she lived in his shadow, loving a man who could build empires, but couldn't face his mother's prejudice or his own fear. He told her it was just not the right time. But when time finally ran out, and he lay dying on a hospital bed, it wasn't his family standing beside him. It was her. What kind of love survives in silence? What kind of woman stays when the world refuses to see her worth? And what would she do when the truth she was denied for years could finally set her free, or burn everything he built to the ground? This is not a story about wealth or status. It's a story about love that hides, grief that heals, and the courage it takes to forgive someone who only learned too late what it means to be proud of you. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge is compassion. And sometimes the loudest truth is the one spoken at a deathbed. Like, share, and stay before watching the story below. The monitors in room 614 hummed softly, their beeping slow and uneven, like a clock that had lost its sense of time. The winter light outside the hospital window was thin, filtered through snow and glass, painting everything in shades of pale blue and white. Amara sat beside the bed, her hands wrapped around his. The skin beneath her fingertips was cold, almost translucent. She had memorized those hands years ago, the way they steadied a glass, the way they reached for her waist in the dark, the way they trembled when he was nervous, but pretending not to be. "Lucas," she whispered, her voice cracking as she leaned close. "It's me. I'm right here." The man in the bed. Lucas Graham, founder of Graham Technologies, the billionaire whose face once filled business magazines, turned his head slightly toward her voice. His eyes opened halfway, glassy but soft when they found her. "I didn't think you'd come," he murmured. Amara's throat tightened. "You think I'd let you go alone?" He tried to smile, but the effort broke into a quiet cough. "You shouldn't be here when they come." She knew who he meant. They, the Grahams, his mother Evelyn, his brother Grant, his perfect all-American family who never knew she existed. "I don't care," she said gently. "Not anymore." Lucas tried to lift his hand. She guided it to her face, pressing his palm to her cheek. For a moment, the world went still. Just her breath, his fading pulse, and the sound of the machines counting down what little time they had left. Outside the room, faint footsteps echoed down the sterile hallway. Voices sharp, clipped, impatient, a nurse's whisper, then a woman's command, cold and practiced. "We're here to see my son. Tell whoever's inside to step out immediately." Amara froze. The door handle turned, then stopped. She could hear the nurse trying to explain, to buy her a few seconds. Lucas opened his eyes again, panic flickering there. "Please, don't let them see you like this." She brushed his hair back. "Like what?" "Lucas, your wife." His lips trembled, the silence between them filled with everything unsaid. For 8 years, she had lived in the shadows of his life dinners alone, anniversaries unspoken, photographs hidden in encrypted folders. She had told herself love was enough, that his world was too complicated, that one day he'd make it right. But now, as the sound of his family's heels clicked closer, Amara realized time had made a liar out of him. The door burst open. A wave of perfume, cashmere, and authority filled the room. Lucas cried a woman in pearls and a beige coat. Evelyn Graham, sharp-featured, the matriarch of the family empire. Beside her stood Grant, tall, suited, his expression carved from disbelief. And there, in the corner of their eyes, was her. Evelyn's gaze sliced across the room, landing on Amara like a blade. "Who are you?" Amara didn't stand. She didn't flinch. She simply turned her head, her voice low but steady. "I'm his wife." The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible. Grant's jaw tightened. "Excuse me." Lucas stirred weakly on the bed. "Grant. Mom. Please." Evelyn ignored him, stepping closer. "This is absurd. My son is a married man." He was. She stopped herself, realizing what she'd just implied. Her voice dropped. "Get out of this room. Now." Amara's eyes glistened, but her posture didn't break. "I've been his wife for 8 years. We married in the Bahamas. You don't have to believe me, but you'll respect that he wanted me here." The nurse shifted uncomfortably at the doorway. The monitors beeped louder, Lucas's heart protesting the chaos. Grant snapped, "Security! Don't!" Lucas gasped. His voice was barely a breath. "She's telling the truth." For a moment, even Evelyn froze. Amara leaned closer to him. "Save your strength." He shook his head weakly. "I should have told them. I wanted to. You don't have to explain," she whispered, tears spilling now. "Just rest." He smiled faintly. "You were never my secret. Amara, you were my light. I was just too afraid to let the world see." Then the monitor screamed a long, flat note. The nurse rushed forward. Evelyn gasped. Grant cursed under his breath. Amara didn't move. She kept holding his hand, even as it went limp in hers. When they finally pulled her away, she didn't fight. Not with the guards. Not with Evelyn's cold stare. Not with the storm of cameras already gathering outside the hospital. She just whispered one last thing before stepping out of the room. "I loved him in silence, but silence ends today." She walked down the hallway, the echo of her heels blending with the snow outside. Each step felt like a promise, because whatever came next, the anger, the denial, the lawsuits, the headlines, she knew she owed Lucas one last thing: to make sure the world saw her, and saw him for who he truly was. Boston smelled of spring that year, the kind of spring that made the air shimmer just a little when the sun hit the Charles River. Back then, before everything became complicated, Amara believed the city itself was breathing new life into her days. She was 29, an interior architect working for a mid-sized design firm on Tremont Street. Her life was tidy and modest: mornings at the studio, coffee breaks with her best friend, evening jogs through the common. Work was her safe zone. Numbers made sense, colors had logic, and buildings didn't judge you by your skin. She met Lucas Graham at a charity event her firm had sponsored for a public library renovation. He was there as a guest speaker, the tech mogul everyone whispered about, the man who had turned a graduate thesis into one of the most powerful software companies in the country. When he stepped on stage, he had that rare kind of stillness that made people listen. His voice was low and warm, almost gentle. After the event, when the crowd had thinned and the photographers packed up, Amara stayed behind to take measurements for the interior remodel. She was crouched near a cracked marble column when she heard someone say softly, "You see it, don't you?" She turned. Lucas was standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the column too. "See what?" she asked. "The beauty under the damage?" He said, "Most people just want to replace it." She smiled without thinking. "That's because fixing takes more time. People don't like slow things anymore." His eyes lifted to hers then, and something unspoken passed between them. A curiosity, a quiet recognition. Later, when she walked to the parking lot, she found him waiting near her car. He wasn't the kind of man you expected to linger, but he did. "I owe you coffee," he said, "for letting me interrupt your inspection." "You don't owe me anything," she said. "Then let me owe you a conversation." That was how it began. Their first coffee stretched into 2 hours of easy laughter. He was nothing like the magazine profiles. No arrogance, no rehearsed charm. He asked about her favorite buildings, her grandmother's cooking, her love of watercolor painting. When he spoke, he looked at her, the way people look when they actually want to remember what you said. In the weeks that followed, they met again sometimes at her office, sometimes by the river. Lucas had a way of making even silence feel full. He'd listen more than talk, but when he did speak, his words carried weight. "You ever get tired of pretending you're fine?" he asked once as they sat on a bench by the water. She thought about that for a long time before answering. "I used to. Now I just choose who gets to see the truth." He smiled faintly. "That's brave." Amara tilted her head. "You sound like someone who does a lot of pretending, too." "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe I'm just waiting for someone I don't have to pretend with." It was the first time she saw a hint of sadness in his eyes. By the time summer rolled around, their names had quietly intertwined. He called her Mara, soft and easy. She started keeping a toothbrush at his townhouse in Beacon Hill. Now, they'd cook dinner together. He'd burn the garlic. She'd tease him about it. He'd fall asleep on the couch with a book in his lap. And she'd draw him in her sketch pad, careful to capture the gentleness that hid behind his wealth. He wasn't a showy lover. He was deliberate, steady, thoughtful. Once, during a quiet night after rain, he told her, "I used to think success would make me feel safe. Turns out, it just built higher walls." And now she asked, "Now I'm wondering if I finally met someone who doesn't need to climb them to see me." That was when she realized she loved him, not the billionaire, not the headlines, but the man who, despite everything, still searched for peace. The first time he brought her to his private home in Maine, she hesitated at the driveway. The property stretched for acres, pine trees, white fences, the Atlantic wind carrying salt and silence. "Feels too quiet," she said. Lucas smiled. "That's the point. Inside." The house was simple stone fireplace, shelves of old records, family photos from years ago. He showed her the study where he worked at night, then the porch where he said he could finally think. As the sun set, painting the sky in orange and rose, he came up behind her and whispered, "You know, I never thought someone would fit here." She turned to him, teasing. In this house, in this life, that night, he made her promise something. "No matter what happens, whatever people say about me or about us, don't let it make you small. Don't let them convince you you're less." She didn't understand why he sounded so serious then. She only nodded and said, "I won't." He kissed her forehead, like sealing an oath. When fall came, he disappeared for nearly 2 weeks on a business trip to California. She didn't mind at first. His world was busy. Hers was steady. But one evening, while scrolling through a news feed, she saw a photo Lucas at a gala in San Francisco. He was smiling beside his mother, Evelyn Graham, and a blonde woman in a navy gown. The caption read, "The Graham family supports youth innovation." Family. The word stung in a way she didn't expect. She knew about Evelyn, everyone in Boston did, but the photo made her feel like she was staring at a version of Lucas she didn't know. one that lived comfortably in a world she'd never been invited to enter. That night, when he called, his voice was warm, casual. "I miss you." "Do they know about me?" she asked quietly. There was a pause. The sound of distant traffic hummed through the phone. "Not yet," he said. "It's complicated. How complicated can love be more than it should be?" The silence stretched. "Lucas," she said softly, "are you ashamed of me?" He exhaled, long and tired. "Never. I'm ashamed of the world I come from." She didn't answer. She wanted to believe him. She really did. But somewhere inside, a small crack began to form, a quiet fear that love wasn't always enough to erase the shadows people carried. Weeks later, he showed up at her apartment with flowers and exhaustion written across his face. "Come with me," he said, to where he just smiled. They drove through the night to Maine again. When they arrived, the living room glowed with candles. On the table lay a velvet box. He took her hands, his voice trembling slightly. "I don't have the courage to face the world with you yet, but I don't want to face the world without you either." She looked down at the ring, then back at him. "Lucas, marry me," he said quietly. "Just us. Somewhere no one knows." The tears came before she could stop them. Not the loud kind, just a quiet overflow that came from too much love and too little certainty. "Why me?" she asked. "Because when I'm with you, I don't have to be Lucas Graham. I just get to be a man who's finally home." And in that moment, despite everything, she said yes. The morning air in Nassau smelled of salt and frangipani. Waves brushed softly against the shore, the sound almost like a heartbeat under the open sky. Amara stood barefoot in the sand, her linen dress fluttering in the warm breeze. Behind her, the small chapel gleamed white against the turquoise sea. Lucas walked toward her, his suit jacket draped over one arm. His hair was messy from the wind, his eyes brighter than she had ever seen them. He looked nothing like the man who graced business magazines or spoke on stage to thousands. He looked human. "You're quiet," he said softly, stopping beside her. "I'm trying to remember this," she said. "Every sound, every color. I want to remember what it felt like before everything changes." He smiled. "Everything won't change." She looked at him, a hint of sadness crossing her face. "It already has." The priest called them inside. The chapel was small, intimate, just 4 people, Lucas, Amara, the priest, and his longtime assistant who served as witness. No cameras, no family, no crowd, only the ocean outside, whispering its eternal rhythm. Lucas slipped the simple silver ring onto her finger, his hands trembling slightly. "Amara Lewis," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I vow to love you quietly, completely, for as long as I'm allowed." She repeated the words, her tone steady but full of emotion. "Lucas Graham, I vow to love you even when the world refuses to see us." When the ceremony ended, he kissed her forehead and said, "You're my wife now. That's all that matters." But deep down, Amara knew it wasn't all that mattered. Not yet. They spent that evening walking along the beach, their footprints trailing behind them in the golden sand. Lucas was relaxed, almost boyish. He carried his shoes, let the waves lick his feet, laughed when she teased him about being terrible at skipping stones. "Do you ever wonder what our story looks like from the outside?" she asked, half joking. "Probably like a scandal," he said. "A headline, waiting to happen. Does that scare you?" He looked at her for a long time before answering. "Yes," he admitted, "but losing you scares me more." She didn't push further. She wanted to believe love was enough to drown out fear. That night, they danced barefoot in the sand to the sound of a small radio, her head resting against his chest, the scent of salt water clinging to their skin. In that small, hidden corner of the world, Amara felt seen. But as the sun rose the next morning, she found Lucas sitting on the balcony, a phone in his hand, his face pale. "What is it?" she asked. He hesitated. The board called. "My brother's stirring things up. There's a leak about the company's merger timing couldn't be worse. And us," she said carefully. He looked at her with regret shadowing his features. "I need to keep this between us. Just for a little while." Her heart sank. "How long is a little while, Lucas?" "Until things settle. Until it's safe." She nodded slowly. She didn't cry or argue. She just looked at the ring on her finger, the one that caught the sunlight so brightly it almost hurt to see. When they returned to Boston, life split in two. In public, Lucas was the untouchable billionaire, confident, strategic, every move calculated. In private, he was tender and quiet, leaving her handwritten notes under her pillow, cooking her breakfast on Sundays, sneaking her into corporate events disguised as a consultant friend. At first, it felt romantic, like a secret garden they both protected. But over time, the secrecy began to suffocate her. There were dinners she couldn't attend, holidays she spent alone, and nights she waited for him to return, only to receive a message. "Next week, I promise." One night, after another charity gala she wasn't invited to, Amara stood in front of the mirror, studying her reflection. The woman staring back looked poised, composed, but lonely. When Lucas came home past midnight, she was still awake. "You didn't tell them about me again?" she said quietly. He loosened his tie, weary. It wasn't the right time. She folded her arms. "When is the right time? After another quarter, after another press deal, after I stop existing." His eyes softened. "Don't say that. Then tell me what I am." "Lucas. Because right now, I'm invisible." He stepped closer, placing his hands on her shoulders. "You're my wife, my everything. I just can't let anyone know." She interrupted. He looked away. "You know how my mother is. You know what the board expects. The investors. The press." She shook her head slowly. "I only know what I deserve." He didn't answer. The silence said enough. Months passed. The hidden marriage became a rhythm of half-lived moments. There were beautiful days, weekends in Maine, laughter over burnt pancakes, the way he brushed her hair from her face as if memorizing it. But always, the shadow of not yet lingered. Then came the night of the storm. Lucas had been in New York for meetings. The rain came in sheets against the windows of their Boston penthouse. Amara sat on the couch, the TV flickering with the evening news. She wasn't paying attention until the anchor mentioned his name. Lucas Graham was seen arriving at the annual Graham Foundation Gala, accompanied by longtime family friend, Olivia Pierce. The camera flashed. Lucas, in a black tuxedo, smiling beside a tall, fair-haired woman in silver. The air left Amara's lungs. She turned off the TV and sat in silence for a long time. When he called later that night, she let the phone ring. He came home the next day, wet from the rain, guilt in his eyes. "It was my mother's idea," he said before she could speak. "Olivia is just a PR image, nothing more. But it's her the world sees," she said, her voice low. "And it's me who hides in the dark." He reached for her, but she stepped back. "I can't keep pretending this doesn't hurt." "I'm protecting you," he said desperately. She shook her head. "No. Lucas, you're protecting them from me." Tears burned at the corners of her eyes. "Do you even know what it feels like to love someone who won't name you?" He didn't answer. And maybe there wasn't an answer that could heal what she had just said. Days later, he left for another business trip. When he returned, he brought her a small velvet box not with jewelry, but a folded document inside. "This is our marriage certificate," he said softly. "I made sure it's legally recognized here. If anything happens to me, you and our future children will be protected." She stared at him, unsure whether to feel comforted or defeated. "You think paperwork replaces the truth?" "It's what I can give you right now," he whispered. "Please, trust me a little longer." She didn't answer, but she took the paper and placed it carefully in a drawer. Later that night, as he slept beside her, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering when love started feeling like a waiting room. Outside, the city lights flickered across the walls, bright, distant, unreachable. And in her chest, the first quiet whisper of doubt began to take shape. How long can love survive in the dark? The first winter after their secret wedding was the coldest Boston had seen in years. The Charles River had frozen over, and snow fell like ash, soft and relentless. Amara spent her morning sketching by the window, wrapped in a gray sweater that smelled faintly of cedar and his cologne. Outside, the world looked peaceful. Inside, the silence felt heavier every day. Lucas was home less and less. Board meetings, investor calls, charity appearances. His calendar overflowed, but none of it included her. Sometimes she'd watch his press conferences online, listening to his calm, polished answers while she sat a few miles away, invisible. One evening, as she prepared dinner, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Walter Reese, Lucas's longtime attorney. "Mrs. Graham, Lucas asked me to drop off some documents for you to review. May I stop by this evening?" Her heart tightened at the formality of it. Mrs. Graham, a title the world didn't even know existed. When Walter arrived, he carried a sealed folder. His expression was professional, but there was something sympathetic in his eyes. "Lucas mentioned he'd be tied up at the office tonight," he said. "He asked that you sign these and keep them safe. It's about the trust fund for your future." She nodded and thanked him, though her hands trembled slightly as she took the papers. After he left, she sat alone at the dining table, flipping through legal terms she barely understood. The words blurred together: trusts, beneficiaries, confidentiality clauses, and at the bottom, Lucas's signature. She closed the folder, staring at the candlelight dancing across the pages. Every legal safeguard he built for her felt like another wall between them. He was protecting her, yes, but also keeping her confined in a world no one else could see. Weeks later, Lucas returned from a trip to London. He looked exhausted, but when he saw her, his face softened. "I missed you," he murmured, pulling her into his arms. "You always say that," she whispered, "and then you disappear again." He held her tighter. "This will change soon, I promise." But promises had started to sound like lullabies, soothing, beautiful, and temporary. That night, they sat by the fireplace. She traced the lines on his hand and asked, "Do you ever get tired of living in two worlds?" He hesitated before answering. "Every day." "Then why don't you stop?" He looked into the fire. "Because I know what happens when those worlds collide. My family, the board, the investors, they'd tear us apart." "And what about me?" she said quietly. "You're tearing me apart already." He turned to her then, pain in his eyes. "Amara, I'm trying to hold everything together. I need time." She smiled sadly. "Time is all I've ever given you, Lucas. But one day, time runs out." Spring came again, and with it, something unexpected, a soft heartbeat during a doctor's visit. Amara stared at the screen in disbelief. "You're about 6 weeks along," the doctor said, smiling. "Congratulations." Her hands instinctively went to her stomach. A baby. Their baby. When she told Lucas that evening, his expression froze for a moment, then melted into awe. "We're going to have a child?" She nodded, tears glistening. He dropped to his knees and kissed her stomach gently. "I'll take care of you both. You have my word." For the first time in months, she saw the man she had fallen in love with, not the billionaire, not the strategist, but the dreamer beneath all the armor. The next morning, he brought home a bouquet of yellow tulips and said, "We'll go public after the baby's born. No more hiding. I want my child to know the truth." Her heart soared, but she didn't realize then that love had always been the easy promise. Courage was the hard part. As her pregnancy progressed, Lucas became protective to the point of obsession. He insisted she stay home, hired private security, and limited her calls. "You're safest here," he said each time she protested. Safe, she thought bitterly. Safe, but unseen. One afternoon, she found him pacing his office, talking on the phone. He didn't notice her at first. "I told you already. The press can't know," he said sharply. "It would cause chaos before the merger." "Yes, I'll handle it. Just make sure that photo doesn't surface." Amara stepped inside. "What photo?" He turned, startled. "Mara, it's nothing. Just business. Don't lie to me. Lucas." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Someone took a picture of us leaving the doctor's office. It's been circulating in a few gossip blogs. I'm containing it." She stared at him. "Containing it? You mean erasing it?" "Please," he said softly. "It's not safe for you yet." She laughed bitterly. "Safe or inconvenient?" He tried to reach for her, but she stepped back. "One day, Lucas, the truth will come out. And when it does, it won't destroy me. It'll destroy you." She didn't mean it as a threat. It was a fact. Their daughter, Lila, was born on a rainy night in May. The hospital room was dim, the sound of thunder rolling outside. When the nurse placed the baby in Amara's arms, she forgot everything else, the pain, the secrecy, the anger. Lila's tiny fingers wrapped around hers, and in that instant, she knew love could be both fragile and fierce. Lucas stood beside her, tears glistening in his eyes. "She's perfect," he whispered. Amara smiled through her exhaustion. "She's ours." He kissed her forehead. "You're my whole world, both of you. And for a brief, fragile time, it felt true." He arranged for them to stay in a private recovery suite under a different name. Only Walter and a handful of trusted staff knew. When they went home, Lucas installed new security, a nanny, and a housekeeper who called her Miss Lewis instead of Mrs. Graham. Each small deception cut deeper than the last. At night, she'd sit by Lila's crib, watching her daughter sleep, whispering softly, "You're real. You exist. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like a secret." Lila's first months were filled with joy and exhaustion. Lucas adored her, though his visits were unpredictable. He'd fly in from meetings just to hold her for an hour, then vanish again. One evening, as Amara was feeding the baby, she turned on the TV for company. The headline made her drop the bottle. Graham Technologies CEO Lucas Graham announces engagement to socialite Olivia Pierce. Her heart stopped. The image showed Lucas and Olivia at a gala, smiling, her hand on his arm, a diamond ring glinting under the lights. Her phone rang seconds later. It was Lucas. "Amara." "Listen to me," he said quickly. "It's not real. It's a temporary arrangement part of the deal with the investors." Her voice shook. "You let them announce it. I had no choice." "You had every choice," she whispered. "You just didn't choose me." There was a long silence on the line. Then he said, "I'll fix this." But this time, she didn't believe him. Days turned into weeks. The story spread everywhere: magazines, news feeds, social media. Amara stopped leaving the house. Neighbors whispered. Employees avoided her eyes. Even Walter looked uncomfortable when he came to check in. One night, unable to sleep, she walked into Lucas's study. The room was lined with photos: his family, business awards, portraits from charity events. Not a single trace of her or Lila. She sat down, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. The ring on her finger caught the moonlight, a symbol of love that had no witness. She opened the drawer where she kept their marriage certificate and ran her fingers over the embossed paper, the proof of their life hidden like everything else. Lila cried softly from the next room. Amara went to her, lifting her into her arms. The baby's warmth grounded her, gave her clarity. She whispered, "I don't know what kind of man your father wants to be, but I know what kind of mother I have to be." And that night, for the first time, she made a quiet decision, one that would change everything later. She would stop waiting to be seen. The day Amara decided to leave, the sky over Boston was gray and heavy, the kind of sky that made even sound feel tired. She moved quietly through the penthouse, packing only what mattered: Lila's baby clothes, her sketchbooks, a few photographs Lucas didn't know existed. Lila, now 9 months old, sat on the floor with her stuffed bear, babbling softly. Every so often she'd glance at her mother, sensing something in the air. Amara paused to look around one last time. The place felt like a museum of someone else's life. Cold marble floors, expensive art, no trace of love. She had spent years waiting for Lucas to make her visible, but the longer she waited, the smaller she had become. Her phone buzzed. A message from Lucas' board meeting in New York. "I'll be home tomorrow. Love you both." She stared at the words for a long time. "Love you both." She wondered what that love meant now, words whispered in the dark, erased by daylight. She left the message unanswered. She took the early train to Portland, Maine, where the ocean air felt easier to breathe. She rented a small cottage on the outskirts of town, using savings she had tucked away from freelance design projects. It wasn't much, but it was hers. At night, she'd rock Lila to sleep, humming the same lullaby her mother once sang to her. Sometimes, when the wind rattled the windows, she'd imagine Lucas standing at the door, ready to say the words she'd been waiting to hear. "Oh, I chose you." But he never came. Instead, 2 weeks later, Walter Reese appeared at the cottage door, the same calm, courteous attorney, holding an envelope in his hand. "Mrs. Graham," he said softly, "Lucas asked me to check on you." "I'm fine," she replied. "Tell him that." He nodded, studying her tired eyes. "He's under a great deal of pressure. The engagement announcement with Miss Pierce was a lie she finished for him." "I know." Walter hesitated. "He's trying to protect you." Amara laughed quietly. "Everyone keeps saying that. But tell me, Mr. Reese, who protects me from him?" He didn't answer. He simply handed her the envelope. Inside were bank statements, documents for a trust fund, and a short note in Lucas's handwriting. "I'm fixing it. Please don't give up on me yet." She folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer she never opened again. Months passed. Amara built a new rhythm. She started taking on small design clients in the area, mostly local cafes and shops. The townspeople liked her warmth, her quiet grace. No one asked too many questions about her past, and she didn't offer answers. Lila grew fast, learning to crawl, to laugh, to reach for things she couldn't yet grasp. Her smile became Amara's anchor, the proof that beauty could come from broken places. One chilly afternoon, while sketching at the kitchen table, Amara turned on the radio. The announcer's voice caught her attention. Graham Technologies CEO Lucas Graham has been hospitalized after collapsing during a board meeting this morning. The pencil fell from her hand. She froze, her heart racing. The announcer continued, "Sources confirm Mr. Graham was rushed to Massachusetts General Hospital. No further details have been released." Amara's mind went blank. For a long time, she just sat there, staring at the wall, the sound of the sea fading into silence. Then she stood, went to Lila's crib, and whispered, "We're going home." By the time she reached the hospital, the lobby was swarming with reporters. Cameras flashed. Voices shouted his name. She pulled her coat tighter, her hood up, shielding Lila's face from the chaos. "Ma'am, this area is restricted," a guard said as she tried to pass. She looked him straight in the eyes. "Tell Lucas Graham's doctor that his wife is here." The guard blinked, uncertain, but something in her voice calm, resolute, made him hesitate before picking up the phone. A few minutes later, a familiar face appeared. Walter Reese. He looked startled to see her. "Amara." "How bad is it?" she asked. He hesitated. "It's serious. Pancreatic cancer. Late stage. He's been hiding it for months." Her breath caught. He knew Walter nodded. He didn't want anyone to worry. He said he'd tell you when the merger closed. Her chest tightened. "Always waiting for the right time," she whispered bitterly. Walter lowered his voice. "He's asking for you." When she stepped into the room, Lucas looked smaller than she remembered. The man who once seemed larger than life now lay pale and fragile, his hair thinned, his face drawn. Tubes and monitors surrounded him. But when his eyes opened and met hers, they softened. "Amara," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "You came." She stood beside him, holding Lila close. "Of course I came." He looked at the baby, his eyes filling with tears. "She's grown. She looks like you." Amara nodded, her throat too tight to speak. "I wanted to protect you both," he said weakly. "I thought if I could fix everything first, make it right, you wouldn't have to face the ugliness of my world." She leaned closer. "You don't protect someone by erasing them, Lucas." His eyes filled with regret. "I know. I was a coward." She wanted to hate him in that moment, but seeing him like this, stripped of all power, all pretense, she couldn't. He reached for her hand. "I left something for you. With Walter. Letters. For you and Lila." Her eyes blurred. "Don't talk like that." He smiled faintly. "You always hated goodbyes." She swallowed hard. "Because I never believed in endings. Only unfinished promises." He laughed softly, then coughed, wincing. "You were the best part of me, Amara. I just didn't know how to show it without breaking everything else." She squeezed his hand, her tears falling freely now. "Then let it break, Lucas. Because love that hides isn't love. It's fear." He looked at her for a long time, his breathing shallow. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for every empty chair, every missed birthday, every lie I told to keep you safe. I see it now. I see you." The monitor beeped steadily beside them. She kissed his forehead, her voice trembling. "Then see this too. Lucas, I forgive you." Outside. The door opened suddenly. Voices filled the room, Evelyn Graham's cold tone, Grant's commanding one. Amara turned, her face calm but resolute. Evelyn froze when she saw her. "What are you doing here?" Amara held her ground. "Saying goodbye to my husband?" Grant scoffed. "Your husband. You think anyone will believe that Lucas stirred weakly? Stop." His voice was faint but clear. "She's telling the truth." Evelyn turned pale. "Lucas." But he didn't look at her. His gaze stayed on Amara. "Promise me," he whispered, "you'll tell Lila who I was. Not what they'll say about me who I really was." Amara nodded through her tears. "I will." Then he smiled one last time, his hand loosening in hers. The monitor slowed, then fell silent. The room filled with a stillness too deep for words. Hours later, Amara stood outside the hospital, the city lights flickering across the wet pavement. Lila slept against her shoulder, warm and safe. Walter approached quietly, handing her a small key. "It's for the safe deposit box," he said. "Letters, video files, documents, everything he wanted you to have." Amara nodded, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "Thank you." Walter hesitated. "He loved you." "Amara," even if he didn't know how to show it. She looked out at the city, the wind carrying the faint hum of sirens. "Love doesn't need to be perfect," she said softly. "It just needs to be honest." And as she walked into the night, she knew the time for silence was over. The world had taken everything from her, her name, her place, her dignity, but it had not taken her truth. And that truth, finally, was hers to tell. The day after Lucas's death, the world exploded with headlines. Tech titan, Lucas Graham, dies at 42. Graham legacy in question as family faces legal storm. The news played on every screen, every radio. Photos of Lucas at charity galas and business events flooded the internet, him shaking hands, smiling for cameras, looking every bit the billionaire visionary. But none of those images showed the man who had kissed her forehead in the dark, or whispered apologies between breaths. Amara sat in the small living room of the hospital suite, Leela asleep in her arms. Outside, snow fell silently. The nurses moved with the hushed precision of people who'd seen too much grief to comment on it anymore. Walter Reese knocked gently before stepping in. "The press is waiting for a statement," he said quietly. Amara looked up. "From me? From anyone? But I imagine they'll come for you soon." She looked down at her daughter. "I'm not ready." Walter nodded. "There's something else. The family's lawyers are meeting at the Graham estate tomorrow. Evelyn insists on handling the funeral arrangements privately. She's not including you." Amara wasn't surprised. She had expected the erasure to begin again the moment he took his last breath. Still, it hurt. She took a deep breath. "Then I'll hold my own goodbye." The next morning, she dressed in black. A plain dress. Simple pearl earrings, the same ones Lucas had given her on their first anniversary. She wrapped Lila in a soft gray blanket and stepped out into the cold. The city was waking up, traffic lights blinking, people rushing to work, unaware that her world had already ended. She walked to the harbor, where the ocean met the winter sky. It was where Lucas had once told her he came to think when he couldn't breathe. She stood there for a long time, the sea wind cutting against her face, her daughter warm against her chest. Then she whispered softly, "He loved you, Leela. Even if the world never believes it, he loved you." Her voice broke, "And I will make sure they know." Later that day, Walter met her at a quiet cafe near Beacon Hill. He carried a briefcase and an envelope. "Lucas left these for you," he said. They were in the deposit box. Amara opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten letter. She recognized his writing instantly slanted. Neat, a little too formal. "My love, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the time I promised you. I spent my life building walls I thought would keep us safe. Instead, they kept us apart. Everything I own means nothing if I couldn't give you my name in the light. You deserve to be seen. Tell them the truth, not for revenge, but for peace. Yours, always Lucas." Tears blurred the ink. Her hand trembled as she slid the USB into her laptop. The video began with Lucas sitting in his study, the same one she'd once cried in. His face was pale, but his eyes were clear. "I've made too many mistakes," he said to the camera. "The biggest one was believing I could love someone in secret and call it protection. Amara Graham is my wife. Lila is our daughter. I married her in Nassau, and she has been my strength every day since. If my family or the board deny this, let this recording be the truth. This is my confession and my apology." He paused, looking straight into the lens. "Mom, Grant, if you're watching this, it's time to stop pretending the world you built is perfect. It isn't. I hope you'll learn to live in the truth, the way Amara always did." The video ended. Amara sat in silence for a long time, staring at the frozen frame of his face. Walter spoke softly. He wanted this made public after his funeral. She nodded slowly. "Then that's what we'll do." 2 days later, the Grahams held a grand funeral at St. Andrew's Cathedral. The pews were filled with politicians, business partners, and cameras. Reporters stood outside, broadcasting the spectacle of wealth and sorrow. Amara didn't attend. She wasn't invited. Instead, she sat in the small church on the other side of the city, the one where she and Lucas had once sat quietly at the back, listening to a choir on a snowy night. She lit a candle, held Lila close, and whispered a prayer. As the light flickered, a strange calm filled her chest. It wasn't peace, not yet, but something close to it. When she left the church, her phone buzzed with a message from Walter. "It's time." The next morning, every major news outlet received the video file. Walter had followed Lucas's instructions precisely, no editing, no delay. Within hours, the confession went viral. News anchors replayed the footage on loop. Lucas Graham secretly married Amara Lewis, a Boston architect, 8 years ago. Photos of Amara appeared, some from her portfolio site, others from public records. The internet, as always, divided itself instantly. Some called her a gold digger. Others called her brave. Many didn't know what to believe. By evening, the media surrounded the Graham estate. Evelyn refused interviews, issuing only a brief statement through the family's spokesperson. The Graham family asked for privacy during this difficult time, but the world wasn't listening. Amara watched it all unfold from her small apartment. The TV glowed blue against the dark room. Lila slept peacefully beside her, unaware of the storm outside. She didn't feel victorious, only tired. Then the phone rang. Mrs. Graham. The voice was female, professional. "This is Diane Cooper from the New York Times. We'd like to offer you the opportunity to tell your story." On your terms. Amara hesitated. For years she had been silent. Now, the world was asking her to speak. She looked at her daughter and thought of Lucas's letter. Tell them the truth, not for revenge, but for peace. She exhaled slowly. I'll do it, she said, but I'm not telling a story about scandal. I'm telling one about love. A week later, the article was published under the title, The Woman He Hid, The Truth He Left. Amara's words filled the pages honest, quiet, unapologetic. She spoke about the loneliness of being loved in secret, the cost of dignity, and the power of forgiveness. She didn't blame him. She didn't attack his family. She simply told the truth. Readers responded in ways she hadn't expected. Letters, emails, messages from women who had lived invisible lives of their own. Words of empathy poured in, not pity. For the first time, Amara realized her story wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who had ever been made to feel unseen. One evening, as she was putting Lila to bed, the doorbell rang. She opened it to find Evelyn Graham standing there. The older woman looked smaller than before, her elegance muted, her eyes rimmed red. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, Evelyn said quietly, I saw the video. Amara nodded. Then you know. Evelyn's voice trembled. He was my son. I didn't recognize the man in that recording. I don't know if I ever really knew him. Amara studied her carefully. Maybe you only knew the parts he showed you. Evelyn looked down. You have his daughter? Amara stepped aside. Would you like to meet her? Evelyn blinked, surprised. Then she nodded. Inside, she approached the crib slowly, her gloved hands shaking. Leela stirred, her big dark eyes opening. For a moment, something in Evelyn's face softened. She reached out and brushed the baby's hand with a trembling finger. She looks like him, she whispered. Amara watched quietly. She's more than that. Evelyn nodded. He wanted to change things. I see that now. When she turned to leave, she paused at the door. If there's anything you need. Amara smiled faintly. There's nothing I need that money can buy. Evelyn hesitated, then gave a small, almost invisible nod before walking away into the cold night. Amara stood there, the door half open, the wind tugging gently at her hair. For the first time in years, she felt the faint warmth of closure. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of it. She turned off the lights, picked up her daughter, and whispered, We're okay now, baby. The truth finally has a name. Outside, the snow had stopped. The reading of Lucas Graham's will took place on a cloudy Thursday morning in a downtown Boston law firm. The conference room was sleek and cold floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. A long mahogany table polished to a shine, and a silence thick enough to break. Amara arrived quietly, wearing a black coat and no makeup. Lila was with a sitter. She didn't want her daughter anywhere near this room. Walter Reese stood beside her, his calm presence steadying her nerves. Across from them sat Evelyn Graham, her face pale but defiant, and Grant, his jaw clenched tight. They didn't look at Amara. Walter cleared his throat, opening a file. As executor of Lucas Graham's estate, it's my duty to read his final will and testament. He began, his voice steady. To my mother, Evelyn Graham. I leave the family estate in Maine and my art collection. To my brother, Grant Graham. I leave the remaining shares of the Graham Foundation, on condition that he continues its mission of supporting education and equality. Evelyn's lips tightened at the word equality. Walter continued, "To my wife, Amara Graham, I leave 70% of my personal assets, including my private residence, trust funds, and properties, to be held in joint custody with our daughter, Lila Graham. The remainder of my estate shall go to a charitable foundation in their name, dedicated to supporting women and children who live in silence." The room went still. Evelyn's eyes flashed. "This is ridiculous. She's not his wife. There's no record of a marriage." Walter folded his hands. "Actually, there is a legally recognized certificate filed in Massachusetts after their ceremony in Nassau. Lucas ensured it was validated before his death." Grant leaned forward, his voice sharp. "You expect us to believe that a secret marriage no one knew about convenient?" Amara met his gaze. "Convenient for whom? Mr. Graham?" The truth or the lie, Grant's glare hardened. "You've manipulated my brother, taken advantage of his illness." "Enough," Walter interrupted firmly. Lucas anticipated these objections. "There's one more thing." He pressed a button on a small remote. The large screen at the end of the room flickered to life. Lucas appeared, sitting behind his desk, looking tired but composed. "If you're watching this," his recorded self began, "then I'm gone. I know this meeting won't be pleasant. Mom, Grant, I need you to hear me." Evelyn's hands gripped her chair, her knuckles white. Lucas continued, his voice calm but unwavering. "Amara's my wife. Our marriage was not a mistake. I hid her because I was weak, not because she wasn't worthy. She gave me love when all I offered was fear. Everything I own, everything I am belongs to her and our daughter. I trust you'll respect that. If not, the world already knows who she is, and they'll know who you are too." He paused, his eyes softening. "This is my last wish. Honor it, not for me, but for the man I should have been." The screen went dark. No one spoke for a long time. The only sound was the soft hum of the air conditioning. Evelyn finally stood, her voice trembling. "You think this will change anything?" "She will never be one of us." Amara rose slowly, meeting her gaze. "I don't want to be one of you." For a brief second, something flickered in Evelyn's expression. Hurt, maybe shame, but it vanished as quickly as it came. Grant gathered his papers. "We'll contest this." Walter sighed. "You can try, but you'll lose." Lucas made sure of that. Amara walked out without another word. Outside, the winter air felt sharp and clean. She stood on the sidewalk, watching cars rush by, her breath forming small clouds in the cold. Walter joined her. "He really did try to protect you in the end?" Amara nodded. "He always meant to, just never in time." He hesitated. "The foundation he named you as chairwoman, it's fully funded. He wanted it to carry your name as much as his." Her chest tightened. "Then that's what I'll do. Not for revenge, for meaning." The following weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and media frenzy. The video confession had already reshaped public opinion, and now the will solidified everything. Some journalists called her the hidden wife who changed the legacy of a billionaire. Others painted her as a quiet hero who had endured the unendurable. But Amara ignored them all. Her focus was on building the foundation Lucas had envisioned. She named it the Lila Foundation for Hidden Hearts, after their daughter. Its mission was simple help women and children who lived unseen. Each day brought new challenges, meetings, press inquiries, board approvals. Yet, for the first time in years, Amara felt purpose, not borrowed power, not pity purpose. At night, when the city grew quiet, she'd sit by the window, watching the lights of Boston flicker like constellations. Sometimes she'd whisper to the sky, "I'm keeping my promise, Lucas," and in the silence, she liked to imagine he heard her. But not everyone found peace in his death. Grant became increasingly vocal in the media, questioning the legitimacy of the marriage and accusing her of fraud. The tabloids fed on it. Photos of Amara with Lila appeared alongside headlines like, "Did the hidden wife manipulate the tech mogul?" She didn't respond. She had learned that silence could be louder than outrage. Still, the pressure grew. Anonymous letters arrived. Threats. Hate messages online. One night, she returned home to find her mailbox vandalized. The words "gold digger" sprayed in red paint. She stood there in the dark, her heart pounding, Lila asleep in her car seat. She took a deep breath, wiped away the paint with her sleeve, and whispered, "We're not afraid." But inside, she was shaking. A few days later, a courier delivered a small box to her office. Inside was an envelope addressed in familiar handwriting. "Amara, if you're reading this, I know things have gotten ugly, but don't let them drag you down. The foundation is bigger than their anger. Remember what you told me once, that love isn't about being loud. It's about being brave. Keep being brave, for her and for yourself. Lucas." Her eyes filled with tears. She pressed the note to her chest, whispering, "You always knew what I needed to hear, even now." The first major event for the Lila Foundation took place 3 months later. The ballroom was filled with donors, journalists, and survivors of the very silence she'd once lived in. Amara stepped onto the stage, wearing a deep navy gown. The crowd hushed. She looked around the room and saw faces, some skeptical, some supportive, many simply curious. She began softly, her voice calm but strong. "I once believed love could exist quietly, that it didn't need to be seen to be real. But I learned something. What we hide, we eventually lose. My husband taught me that, in his own imperfect way. This foundation isn't about me or him. It's about everyone who has ever been silenced by shame, fear, or judgment. It's about finding courage in truth." She paused, glancing at a framed photo of Lucas and baby Lila displayed beside the stage. "He wanted to build something that mattered. So do I. Let this be the light we leave behind." The audience rose in applause. Some were crying. Others simply nodded, understanding more than they expected to. As Amara stepped down, Walter caught her eye from across the room, smiling with quiet pride. She smiled back, her heart steady. For the first time in years, she felt seen not as Lucas Graham's hidden wife, but as herself. That night, after putting Lila to bed, she sat on the balcony overlooking the city. The stars were faint, but visible, the kind of night that felt like a beginning, not an end. She whispered into the wind, "You're free now, Lucas, and so am I." The city lights flickered below, and somewhere in her chest, the ache softened into something gentler acceptance, because she finally understood love couldn't always save you, but it could teach you how to live honestly. And that, she thought, was the only legacy worth keeping. Spring came slowly to Boston, as if the city itself was learning how to breathe again after months of ice. Amara's life had settled into a fragile rhythm: mornings with Lila, days filled with foundation meetings, nights spent in the quiet hum of her apartment. But peace, she had learned, was never permanent, especially when power and truth collided. It began with a phone call. "Mrs. Graham, this is Detective Rowe with the Boston Police Department. I'm afraid there's been an incident at the Lila Foundation office." Her heart stopped. What kind of incident? "A fire. early this morning. She didn't remember hanging up, only the sound of her shoes hitting pavement, her breath turning to smoke in the cold air as she ran toward the taxi. When she arrived, the street was blocked by police tape. Smoke still curled into the sky, gray against the pale dawn. Firefighters moved back and forth, shouting orders. The front of the building was blackened, the foundation sign half melted, letters warped by heat. Walter appeared from the crowd, his face ashen. "Amara, thank God you're here. It started around 4, Mum." Luckily, no one was inside. Her voice trembled. "Do they know what caused it?" He hesitated. "They're calling it suspicious." She closed her eyes. Of course it was. Too many people still saw her foundation as a stain on Lucas's legacy, a challenge to the world they'd built on silence. She looked at the smoldering ruin. This was more than a building. She whispered. It was his promise. Walter put a hand on her shoulder. "We'll rebuild. You know Lucas, he planned for everything. The insurance covers full restoration." She nodded, swallowing hard. "Then we'll make it bigger." That night, after putting Lila to sleep, Amara sat by the window, staring at the flickering city lights. Her reflection in the glass looked older, stronger. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "You should have stayed silent. Some things are better buried." She froze. Then the next message came. "You're not one of them. You never will be." Her hands trembled, but she didn't respond. Instead, she locked the phone and turned it face down. Fear was a luxury she could no longer afford. 2 days later, she was invited to a board hearing for Graham Technologies. The company's public image had suffered after Lucas's death and the revelation of their hidden marriage. The shareholders wanted stability, and some of them wanted her out of the narrative completely. Walter insisted she attend. "Lucas named you a majority beneficiary. Your voice carries weight." So she went. The boardroom looked almost identical to the one where she'd first met Lucas years ago. Cold, strategic, heartless. Grant was already there, flanked by lawyers. He didn't stand when she entered. "Mrs. Graham," he said. His tone clipped. "Glad you could join us." She sat across from him. "Calm? I'm sure you are." He smirked. "The foundation fire? Terrible accident? Or perhaps karma?" Walter's eyes narrowed. "Careful. Grant." Amara ignored him. "If you came here to make threats, you're wasting both our time." Grant leaned forward, his voice dropping. "You've humiliated this family. You've destroyed our reputation, dragged our name through the mud. My mother can't even leave the house without cameras chasing her." Amara's voice was steady. "Maybe the world's finally seeing the truth." He slammed his hand on the table. "The truth. You were his secret. You were never supposed to be part of this." Her gaze didn't waver. "Then why am I still here for a moment?" Neither spoke. Grant's jaw tightened. He looked like he wanted to strike her, but the room's silence restrained him. She stood. "I don't need your approval. I came because this company still carries his name, and I won't let you turn it into a weapon against what he stood for." Grant laughed bitterly. "You really think you can protect him? His reputation? You're a stain he couldn't wash away." Walter rose. "That's enough." But before they could leave, the door opened and a woman stepped inside. Everyone turned. She was tall, elegant, dressed in a gray suit, her hair pulled back neatly, her eyes sharp but calm. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said. "I'm Detective Rowe, Boston PD." Amara blinked. Detective Rowe nodded. We've been investigating the fire at your foundation. The evidence suggests arson accelerant traces, multiple ignition points, but that's not all. She placed a small envelope on the table. We traced security footage from a nearby bank. It shows someone entering the alley behind your building at 3:42. Grant frowned. And what does that have to do with us? Rose's gaze landed squarely on him. The individual used a vehicle registered to Graham Technologies. One of your corporate cars. Grant stiffened. That's absurd. Walter crossed his arms. Care to explain? Grant stammered. Anyone could have used it, employees. Contractors. Rowe cut him off. The driver's face is clear on camera. She opened the envelope and laid down photographs. The room fell silent. The images showed Grant himself, wearing a dark jacket, holding a gas can. Amara's breath caught. Walter exhaled sharply. Grant, my God! Grant's face flushed red. This is ridiculous. It's fake. She's setting me up. He pointed at Amara, his voice rising. She's been after this family since day one. Amara didn't move. Her voice was quiet but cutting. I didn't have to destroy you. Grant, you did that all by yourself. Rowe gathered her files. Mr. Graham, we'll need you to come in for questioning. Grant slammed his chair back and stormed out, his lawyer following. When the door closed, silence fell again. Walter turned to Amara. You okay? She nodded slowly. I will be. Rowe gave her a small, respectful nod. Mrs. Graham, for what it's worth, I think your husband would have been proud. Amara smiled faintly. He's learning to be. That evening, Amara went to the pier where she and Lucas had once walked in the rain. The wind carried the scent of salt and memory. She watched the water shimmer under the city lights, thinking about the strange way truth always burned everything down before it set you free. She whispered into the wind, It's over now. Lucas. The storm finally passed, but deep down, she knew storms never truly ended. They just changed shape. A few weeks later, Evelyn visited again. Her face looked softer this time, humbled by loss. I heard about Grant, she said quietly. I can't believe he'd go that far. Amara looked at her, sadness in her eyes. Hate doesn't always know its limits. Evelyn sighed, her voice cracking. I spent my life teaching my sons to protect our name. Maybe I should have taught them to protect their hearts. Amara's eyes softened. It's not too late to start? For a moment. Evelyn simply nodded, her gaze drifting to Lila, who was stacking blocks on the floor. She's his legacy, she murmured. Not the company, not the money. Her. Amara smiled faintly. That's what I keep telling everyone. Evelyn turned to leave, but then paused at the door. If you'll have me, I'd like to see her again. Sometimes. Amara hesitated, then nodded. We'll see. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a beginning. That night, Amara sat with Lila on her lap, reading from one of Lucas's old journals she'd found among his things. His handwriting curved across the page, uneven but full of thought. To live truthfully is to live without armor. I wish I'd learned that sooner. She traced the words gently with her finger, tears glimmering in her eyes. Your daddy finally learned, she whispered to her daughter. And so did I. The baby giggled, reaching up to touch her mother's cheek, her small fingers brushing away the tears. Amara smiled through them. We're going to be okay, little one. No more hiding. Outside. The harbor lights danced across the dark water. The air was cool but gentle, carrying with it the quiet promise of something new. For the first time. Amara didn't feel like she was standing in Lucas's shadow. She was standing in her own light, and it was enough. The envelope arrived on a warm afternoon in June, carried by a courier who asked for her signature, but said nothing else. It was thick, sealed in cream-colored paper, with an embossed gold crest one Amara hadn't seen in years. She brought it inside, laid it on the kitchen table, and stared at it for a long time. The name on the return address made her chest tighten. Father Matthew Clark, Son Mary's Chapel, Nassau, the place where everything began, where she and Lucas had stood barefoot on the sand, promising forever under a sky full of stars. She broke the seal with shaking hands. Inside was a single folded letter and an old photograph of the two of them smiling, sunburned, radiant. Her eyes were closed in laughter. His arm was around her shoulder. They looked so free, so unburdened. The letter was written in Lucas's handwriting. My love, if you're reading this, then one of my last arrangements finally found its way to you. I asked Father Clark to keep this until I could no longer deliver it myself. I wanted to remind you of where we started before the walls, before the fear. That day in Nassau was the truest thing I ever did. I know I can't undo the years of hiding, but I can leave behind something that only you and I shared. In the chapel safe, there's a small box with our initials carved into it. Inside are the vows we wrote by hand, the ring you thought was lost, and a document, something I never showed you, because I was afraid it would make you stay when you should have run. Go there, Amara. You'll understand. L. Her breath caught. For a long time she just sat there, staring at the letter, the sound of Lila's laughter from the living room echoing faintly through the apartment. Then she stood. She called Walter. I need to go to Nassau, she said simply. 3 days later, Amara stepped off the plane into the humid air of the Bahamas. The sunlight hit her face, warm and relentless. It smelled like salt and memory. Lila stayed with Evelyn in Boston, an arrangement that still felt strange, but civil. The older woman had softened since Grant's arrest, visiting often, bringing small gifts for her granddaughter. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something human. Amara rented a car and drove along the winding coastal road toward St. Mary's Chapel. The ocean glittered beside her, turquoise and endless. Every turn of the road seemed to pull her deeper into the past. When she reached the chapel, she almost didn't recognize it. The once white walls were now faded cream, vines curling along the edges. The bell tower leaned slightly, but the wooden doors still stood strong. Father Clark met her at the steps. His hair was whiter now, his eyes kind and curious. Amara, he said warmly. You came. She smiled faintly. I wasn't sure I could. He studied her face. You carry a lot of ghosts, child. Not ghosts, she said quietly. Just promises. He nodded, motioning her inside. I kept his box safe, as he asked. It's been waiting. The chapel was empty except for the soft flicker of candles and the faint smell of incense. Father Clark led her to a small room behind the altar. From a wooden cabinet, he withdrew a small cedar box with initials carved into the lid A+L. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside were the old vows, yellowed but intact. The paper still smelled faintly of the sea. Beneath them lay a simple gold band, her wedding ring, lost years ago during a storm. And beneath that, a sealed envelope marked for Amara. Only when she's ready. She opened it. Inside was a legal document, a notarized deed transferring ownership of a small villa on Paradise Island. In Lucas's neat handwriting across the top were the words, "Our beginning should also be your freedom." Father Clark watched her carefully. He said you'd understand when you saw it. Amara nodded slowly, tears gathering in her eyes. He was giving me back the part of my life I left here. She spent that afternoon walking along the beach near the chapel. The sand was hot, soft between her toes. The waves broke gently against the shore, each one whispering a memory. She could almost see him there barefoot, laughing, his hair tousled by the wind, reaching for her hand. The memory was so vivid it made her chest ache. "I wish you'd told me," she murmured to the sea. "I wish you'd trusted me to stay." But she understood now. He hadn't kept the secret to protect himself. He'd done it because he feared she'd spend her life in the shadows of his world. And yet, she'd lived there anyway. That evening, she visited the villa. It was small and sunlit, perched on a hill overlooking the turquoise bay. Inside, everything smelled faintly of cedar and salt. There were old photos on the mantel, ones she didn't even know existed. Her and Lucas at the market, laughing over spilled coconuts, him holding her hand in the crowd. Little pieces of a life that had once been hidden now laid bare. She walked through the rooms, her fingers brushing the walls. It was as if he'd built this place not as a monument, but as a reminder that love, no matter how flawed, could still leave something beautiful behind. She found one more note on the bedside table. "I bought this for us the day after our wedding. I dreamed we'd grow old here. But even if I can't, I want you to have it. Maybe one day, bring Lila. Tell her this is where love began, not where it ended." She sat on the bed, holding the note to her chest, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to cry not the silent tears of loss, but the deep, cleansing kind that wash away regret. 2 days later, she returned to Boston with the box, the deed, and something she hadn't felt in years' peace. When she arrived home, Evelyn was waiting on the steps, holding Lila. "You're back," Evelyn said softly. "I am. She missed you. I missed her more." Amara smiled, taking her daughter into her arms. Evelyn hesitated. "I read the article about your foundation's rebuilding. It's inspiring. Thank you." They stood in silence for a moment, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows on the porch. Finally, Evelyn spoke again. "He would have been proud of you. You know, I wasn't. Not at first. But I am now." Amara looked at her, surprised by the honesty in her voice. "We both love the same man," she said gently. "We just loved him differently." Evelyn nodded. Maybe he needed both kinds. She smiled faintly. Maybe. That night, after Lila fell asleep, Amara sat by the window with a cup of tea. The city was quiet, the light soft and golden. She opened Lucas's letter again, tracing the words with her finger. "Our beginning should also be your freedom." Freedom, she thought, wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about learning to live beside it without letting it define you. She picked up her phone and called Walter. "Walter," she said softly, "I want to open the first international branch of the foundation in Nassau." He chuckled on the other end. "He'd like that." "I think he would," she whispered. "It's time to build something that lasts." Later, as she turned off the lights, she paused at Lila's crib. Her daughter stirred, mumbling softly in her sleep. Amara brushed a curl from her forehead and whispered, "One day, I'll show you where love began." The night outside was calm, the city breathing quietly, and for the first time, Amara didn't feel haunted by Lucas's absence. She felt guided by his love, finally free to carry it forward. The grand opening of the Lila Foundation for Hidden Hearts, Nassau branch, took place under a sun-drenched sky that shimmered like glass. The ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and hibiscus through the open courtyard, where people gathered women from local shelters, community leaders, journalists, and children with wide eyes filled with wonder. Amara stood at the edge of the crowd, the sound of laughter mixing with the rhythm of waves in the distance. She wore a soft white dress and no jewelry except the simple gold ring she had found in the cedar box. The ring that had once slipped from her hand during a storm, now shining again on her finger like it had never been lost. Walter Reese stood beside her, smiling with quiet pride. "He'd have loved this," he said softly. Amara nodded. He would have wanted it to feel alive, not grand, something that breathes. Walter looked around. The building was modern, but gentle open spaces filled with light, walls painted in warm tones, gardens surrounding every path. It didn't look like a corporate monument. It looked like a sanctuary. "Amara Graham," he said, shaking his head with admiration. "You've turned grief into architecture." She smiled faintly. "Maybe that's what love is, something we keep building, even when we lose the person we built it for." As the ceremony began, Amara took the stage. The small microphone felt warm in her hands, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "I was once part of a story that lived in the dark." She began. A story about hiding, about fear, about the belief that love could survive behind closed doors. But love isn't meant to hide. It's meant to heal. This foundation exists for every woman, every child, every soul who's ever been told to stay silent. Here, you are seen. Her gaze swept across the crowd. Faces met hers, some smiling, some crying, some simply listening as if her words were air. We call it the foundation of light, because that's what truth does. It breaks through. No matter how long the night, the light always finds its way in. The audience erupted into applause. Some women reached out to hug each other. Others just closed their eyes and breathed. Amara felt something loosen inside her, a weight she hadn't realized she was still carrying. After the ceremony, she walked alone to the small villa Lucas had left her on Paradise Island. It had become her refuge, a place where she could think without the noise of the world pressing in. As she entered, the sound of the ocean filtered through the open windows. She poured a cup of tea and sat on the veranda, watching the horizon glow gold and pink. Her phone buzzed. It was a video message from Boston. "Evelyn holding Lila." "Say hi to Mommy," Evelyn said softly. Lila giggled, waving at the camera. "Mama, I build castle." Amara smiled, tears filling her eyes. "You did, my brave girl," Evelyn added quietly. "She talks about you all the time. She says you're her sunshine." For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Evelyn said, "I'll bring her to Nassau soon. She should see what her mother's building." Amara's throat tightened. "I'd like that." After the call ended, she looked out at the ocean again. The light danced across the waves, and for the first time, she felt like Lucas was right there beside her, not as a ghost, but as a quiet echo inside her strength. Later that evening, a young woman approached her outside the foundation. She couldn't have been more than 20. Her hand shook slightly as she spoke. "Mrs. Graham," she said timidly, "I wanted to thank you. Before this place, I didn't think people like me mattered." Amara smiled. "People like you." The girl hesitated. "People who were told they're too broken to be loved." Amara's eyes softened. "Then they lied to you. You're not broken. You're just unfinished." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "That's what you said in your interview. I wrote it down." She took out a small folded paper from her pocket, worn at the edges. Amara unfolded it and read her own words. Healing isn't forgetting. It's learning to live without pretending. Amara touched the girl's hand. You'll heal, she said quietly. Just give it time. Light doesn't rush anyone. The girl nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. Thank you. As she walked away, Amara watched her go, realizing that maybe this human connection was what Lucas had meant all along when he spoke about leaving a legacy. That night, a storm rolled over Nassau. The sky darkened, thunder rumbling like the heartbeat of the ocean. Amara stood by the window, watching the rain cascade down the glass. And then she saw it, a flash of lightning illuminating the small chapel across the hill, the one where she and Lucas had said their vows. On impulse, she grabbed her coat and ran through the rain. When she reached the chapel, the door creaked open, as if waiting for her. Candlelight flickered inside Father Clark, still awake, tending to the altar. He turned, surprised. You came in the storm. She smiled faintly. It felt right. He nodded. The storms bring reminders. They always do. Amara walked to the front pew and sat down. Her eyes drifted to the cross above the altar, then to the spot where she had once stood barefoot, trembling and laughing as she said, I do. Her hand brushed against the back of the pew, and she found something carved into the wood, 2 initials, faint but visible, L+A. She gasped softly. He carved this. Father Clark smiled. The morning after your wedding, said he wanted to leave a mark that wouldn't fade, even if people forgot. Amara traced the letters with her fingertips, her heart swelling. He always thought ahead. The priest's voice was gentle. He loved you with a quiet kind of bravery, the kind that takes longer to be understood. Amara looked up, her eyes glistening. I think I finally understand it now. Outside, the storm began to ease. The rain softened, turning into a steady rhythm against the roof. Father Clark handed her a small candle. Take it with you, he said, for when the world feels dark again. She nodded, her voice soft. Thank you. As she stepped back into the night, the candle's small flame glowed steady despite the wind. By morning, the sky had cleared. The world smelled new, washed clean. Amara stood on the balcony of the villa, the candle still burning beside her. She watched the sunlight spill over the ocean and thought about all that had changed, not just around her, but within her. She whispered to the sea, You see, Lucas, I kept the promise. You wanted light, and now there's light everywhere. Lila's laughter echoed in her memory, bright, pure, endless. Amara smiled through her tears. Love hadn't saved her. It had shaped her. It had broken her open until she became something stronger, something truer. And as the morning sun rose over Nassau, she finally felt it, not just peace, but purpose, the kind that lasts beyond pain, beyond time. 6 months passed after the opening of the Nassau branch, and the foundation had grown beyond what anyone had imagined. Donations poured in from across the world, not just because of Lucas Graham's name, but because of Amara's story, one that people said gave them hope in a world that often forgot compassion. Her face had appeared on magazine covers and documentaries, yet she carried it all with quiet grace. The attention no longer frightened her. She had learned that visibility wasn't a threat, it was power. When used for truth, Boston felt different now. Warmer. The house she had once shared with Lucas no longer felt like a mausoleum of regret, but a home again. Evelyn often visited, and though their conversations were still careful, they no longer carried the weight of hostility. Amara had begun to think that maybe, just maybe, peace had finally found her, until the letter arrived. It was hand-delivered by Walter, who looked uncharacteristically tense when he handed it to her. "You should read this alone," he said quietly. She frowned, but nodded. When he left, she sat by the window and opened it. The handwriting was unfamiliar sharp, elegant, deliberate. Mrs. Graham. There are things about your husband's company you need to know. Things he didn't have time to fix. He trusted the wrong people. Meet me tomorrow evening at the old pier, 7 p.m. Come alone. E.M. Amara read it twice. The initials stirred something in her memory, though she couldn't place them. She turned the letter over, no address, no number, just the faint scent of cologne and salt. Her instincts told her it could be a trap, but something deeper, something that had carried her through years of half-truths, told her it was important. The next evening, the air at the pier was heavy with mist. The harbor lights blinked faintly in the fog as she waited, her coat pulled tight. A figure appeared from the shadows, a man, tall, wearing a gray suit. His hair was silver at the temples, his face calm but watchful. "Mrs. Graham," he said softly, approaching. "My name is Edward Mason. I was Lucas's former business partner." She studied him carefully. "You worked with him at Graham Technologies, I did," he replied, "for 10 years, until I wasn't supposed to anymore." "What do you mean?" Edward sighed, glancing out toward the water. Lucas was a visionary, but he made enemies, especially when he started redirecting funds toward humanitarian projects, the kind that didn't profit the board. Amara's stomach tightened. "You're saying someone tried to stop him?" Edward nodded. "They didn't just stop him, they sabotaged his work. The merger he was preparing before his death, it wasn't a business expansion. It was a cover for transferring a large portion of the company's profits into a secret fund for the foundation, for you and Lila. But after he died, that transfer disappeared." Amara's pulse quickened. "Disappeared? How buried?" Edward said grimly. "Documents rewritten. Accounts wiped clean. The board claimed it never existed." "Grant," she whispered. He met her eyes. "Exactly. Before his arrest. He had connections, people who still operate inside the company. They're pretending to follow your husband's will, but they're bleeding money through shell firms overseas." Amara's breath caught. "Why tell me this now?" "Because I made a mistake," he said quietly. "I helped them. I thought I was protecting the company. But after Lucas's death, I realized what I'd done. You deserve to know the truth." He handed her a flash drive. "Everything's here, the emails, the accounts, the names. You can expose them." She hesitated. "And what happens to you?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe redemption, maybe ruin. Doesn't matter anymore. I owe Lucas that much." She took the drive, her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you." As he turned to leave, he said, "Be careful, Mrs. Graham. The truth makes people desperate." That night, Amara sat alone at her desk, staring at the screen. The files opened with a password Lucas had once used for everything Lila 2020. Emails scrolled across the monitor messages between Grant and several executives, instructions for diverting funds, legal manipulations, even plans to discredit Amara's foundation if she ever interfered. Her stomach twisted. It wasn't just greed. It was cruelty. They had planned to erase everything Lucas had left behind. She printed copies, stored backups, and called Walter first thing in the morning. "Send them to me," he said immediately. "We'll take it to federal investigators. But Amara, this won't be quiet. I'm done with quiet." She replied, "Let them hear me." The next few weeks became a storm. When the story broke, it spread faster than she could have imagined. Corruption scandal, rocks, Graham Technologies, widow exposes internal fraud. Public outrage followed. Investors pulled out. Government officials opened investigations. The once mighty empire of the Grahams trembled under the weight of truth. Evelyn called her voice trembling. "You've destroyed them." Amara's tone was calm. "No, I just stopped them from destroying what Lucas stood for." The silence that followed was long and heavy. Then Evelyn said softly, "Maybe he needed you more than I ever understood." For the first time, Amara heard something real in her mother-in-law's voice, respect. When the hearings began, Amara was asked to testify. The courtroom was packed, cameras flashing. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back, her expression calm. Grant, now in prison, refused to appear. The executives sat with their lawyers, their faces drawn and pale. Amara took the stand and spoke not like a widow, but like a woman who had found her voice. "My husband believed that love could fix what money broke," she said clearly. "He was wrong about that, but he was right about one thing. Truth outlives everything." Her words echoed through the courtroom, quiet and powerful. When the verdict came weeks later, the guilty were convicted of fraud and embezzlement. The stolen funds were ordered to be restored, half to the foundation, half to charities Lucas had once supported. It was victory, but it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like balance. That evening, Amara returned to the pier, the same one where Edward had met her. The sky was streaked with pink and gold, the water calm. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. For the first time in years, there was no fear in her chest, only gratitude. Lila's laughter echoed behind her. Evelyn stood a few feet away, holding the child as she toddled toward her mother. "Look, Mama, see Amara knelt, scooping her up. Yes, baby, the sea. It's where everything began." Evelyn smiled faintly. She loves the water, just like him. Amara nodded. Maybe she remembers him somehow. They stood there together, the two women who had once been enemies, watching the horizon as the sun began to dip. Amara whispered, "The truth always comes full circle, doesn't it?" Evelyn looked at her and nodded. "It does. And sometimes it brings you home." Later that night, when Lila was asleep, Amara sat by the window with her laptop open. An email notification appeared, a new message from Edward Mason. "Heard the verdict. You did what Lucas couldn't. I think he'd be proud. The world finally knows who built his heart. Amara smiled through quiet tears. She looked out at the city lights, each one a spark against the dark. Lucas had always said light finds its way in. Now, it wasn't just finding her, it was shining from her. Boston was slowly moving into autumn again, the season when the air felt heavy with memory and the light turned gold, before fading into early dusk. The city had changed since Lucas's death. But more than that, Amara had changed. Her story was no longer whispered in corners or printed in scandal columns. Now it was told in classrooms, at women's conferences, in quiet living rooms where people talked about love and courage and what it meant to choose dignity over revenge. The foundation had become a movement. The Light Campaign, as people called it, funded community centers in 5 states. And at the heart of it all stood Amara, graceful, calm, speaking in a voice that carried both softness and power. But even as her name spread, she remained grounded. Every morning, she still made breakfast for Lila, still took her to the park, still stopped at the small church where she lit a candle for Lucas. Her life wasn't grand. It was full, and that was enough. One morning, she received a letter from the Massachusetts Department of Corrections. It was stamped and official, but the handwriting inside was unmistakable, rigid, slanted, proud even in its defeat. Amara. They tell me I have 6 months left. Cancer. They say, poetic. Isn't it? The same thing that took my brother now takes me. I've had a lot of time to think in here, more than I deserve. I blamed you for everything. But maybe I was really blaming myself for what I did, for what I didn't do. Lucas was my brother, and I couldn't protect him from his own heart. I thought I was saving the family name, but all I did was bury it. I don't ask for forgiveness. I just ask that you let Lila know her uncle wasn't born cruel. He just never learned how to be brave. Amara folded the letter carefully, her hands trembling. The words weren't redemption, but they were real, and real was enough. That night, she stood by the window watching rain streak the glass, thinking about how pain often traveled in families until someone finally decided to stop carrying it. Maybe this was that moment. Weeks passed. The world moved quickly around her interviews, meetings, the growing foundation. But Amara found herself drawn to one thought over and over again. Forgiveness isn't about the person who hurt you. It's about the person you want to become. So she wrote back, Grant, I don't know what peace looks like for you, but I know what it feels like to want it. I don't hate you. I don't even pity you. I just hope, before your time runs out, you find what Lucas found at the end, honesty. Tell the truth to yourself before it's too late. That's the only forgiveness that matters. Amara. She sent the letter without telling anyone, and for the first time since Lucas's death, she slept deeply, dreamlessly. A few months later, Amara stood at the Boston harbor again. The water shimmered silver beneath the pale sun, and gulls circled lazily overhead. Evelyn was beside her, wrapped in a long coat, holding Lila's hand. Grant had died 2 days before. There was no funeral. He had requested his ashes be scattered at sea. Walter had handled the legalities, and Amara had quietly agreed to come. Leila ran ahead, her laughter carrying on the wind. She didn't understand death yet, only that her mother cried sometimes when she talked about the people she loved. Evelyn watched her granddaughter, her eyes soft but weary. You didn't have to come, she said quietly. Amara looked out over the water. Yes, I did. Evelyn nodded slowly. He read your letter. He asked me to thank you. Amara didn't reply. Instead, she opened the small urn in her hands and let the ashes scatter into the wind. They swirled and danced for a moment before vanishing into the waves. Evelyn whispered, Do you believe in forgiveness? Amara's voice was soft. I believe in letting go. They stood there for a long time, the silence between them no longer heavy, just human. When they finally turned to leave, Evelyn stopped and said, You know, he would have loved seeing her grow. Amara smiled faintly. He does, in his own way. Months later, in December, the first snowfall of the season blanketed the city in quiet white. Amara sat by the fireplace, reading while Lila colored beside her. The house was warm, filled with the soft hum of Christmas songs playing from an old speaker. Evelyn was staying for the holidays, sleeping in the guest room, a fact that still made Amara smile in disbelief sometimes. She looked over at her daughter, who was drawing a picture of their family Amara, Leela, and a tall figure in the background with brown hair and a bright smile. Who's that? Amara asked gently. Lila grinned. Daddy. He's helping the stars. Amara blinked back tears. He always did, didn't he? Lila nodded seriously. He said stars are people we miss, but they still shine, so we don't forget them. Amara reached out, brushing a curl from her daughter's forehead. You're just like him. No, Lila said, shaking her head. I'm like you. Mama, you make people not scared. Amara couldn't speak for a moment. She just held her daughter close, whispering, You make me brave. Later that night, after Lila was asleep, Amara went to her study. On the desk lay the last of Lucas's letters, the ones Walter had given her months ago. She had read most of them, but one remained sealed, marked simply open when you're ready to forgive. She hesitated, then opened it. My Amara, if you ever find this, it means you've made it through the storm. I know I can't ask you to forgive me for hiding you, but I hope you'll forgive yourself for ever thinking you weren't enough. You were the only thing in my life that was ever real. Tell our daughter I see her in every sunrise. Tell her she was never born in the shadows. She was born in love. And tell yourself this. You don't have to carry me anymore. Live for you now. Lucas. Her tears fell silently onto the paper. She pressed the letter to her heart, whispering, I already forgave you. Lucas, I just didn't know it until now. Outside, snow fell softly, coating the city in light. The next day, the foundation hosted its annual winter gala. The theme that year was Bridges of Light. People came from all over, the same women whose lives had been changed by Amara's work. Donors, and even political leaders who had once dismissed her as a scandal. Walter stood on stage, introducing her. Tonight, we celebrate not just a foundation, but a movement. And it all began with one woman's courage to love and forgive. The room erupted in applause as Amara walked onto the stage. She wore a flowing ivory gown, her hair in soft curls. The lights reflected in her eyes as she spoke. When I started this journey, I thought it was about survival. Then I thought it was about justice. But now I know it's about healing. Because forgiveness isn't a weakness. It's how we stop pain from passing on. She paused, looking at the crowd. Every one of us carries something broken, but broken things can still shine. As the applause rose again, she looked up toward the ceiling, where thousands of small lights glimmered like stars. For a brief, beautiful second, she felt Lucas there, quiet, proud, free, and she smiled. That night, when the gala ended, Amara stepped outside into the cold air. Walter joined her, handing her a coat. You did it, he said softly. She shook her head. No, we did it. All of us. He smiled. What will you do now? Amara looked up at the sky, where the stars shimmered faintly. Keep building. For her. For the women who still think they have to hide. And maybe, for me. Walter nodded. Lucas would have said the same thing. I know, she said quietly. He's still here in everything good that's left. And as she walked to her car, snowflakes drifting down around her, Amara felt a peace so deep it almost felt like sunlight. Forgiveness hadn't erased the pain. It had simply made space for love to live again. And that, she knew, was the truest legacy anyone could leave behind. The spring air in Boston was soft and warm, carrying the scent of magnolia blossoms from the trees lining Commonwealth Avenue. The city, once heavy with grief for Amara, now seemed to breathe with her. Every morning, as she walked Lila to school, neighbors waved, strangers smiled, and she felt something she hadn't felt in years: belonging. The Lila Foundation had just opened its 7th center, this time in Chicago. Each new branch carried a mural designed by local artists, painted with one phrase she had chosen herself: The light we give survives us. It had been nearly 2 years since Lucas's death. The ache of loss no longer felt like an open wound. It had become a scar, quiet and familiar, something she carried with gratitude instead of pain. Lila, now 8, had grown into a curious, radiant girl with her father's calm and her mother's strength. She was the heartbeat of Amara's every day, the reminder that love, no matter how broken, still bore beautiful fruit. That morning, as Amara made breakfast, Lila came running into the kitchen with a folded flyer in her hand. "Mama, my school is doing a project about heroes. Can I talk about Daddy?" Amara froze for a moment, a gentle smile forming on her lips. "Of course, baby. Why Daddy?" "Because he helped people," Lila said proudly. "And you said heroes are people who help, even when it's hard." Amara knelt, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "That's right. He was brave in his own way." "Can I say he was your hero, too?" Lila asked softly. Amara hesitated, her eyes glistening. "He was part of what made me brave." "Yes, you can say that." Lila grinned, hugging her mother tightly before dashing out to get her backpack. When the door closed behind her, Amara stood still for a moment, her hand resting on the counter. She whispered to the empty room, "You hear that? Lucas, your little girl sees you." That afternoon, she visited the headquarters of the foundation. The new wing was almost complete, a glass atrium filled with natural light, surrounded by gardens. The architect overseeing the project, a kind and quiet man named Thomas Reed, waved when he saw her. "Mrs. Graham," he said warmly, "we've just finished the memorial courtyard. Would you like to see it?" She nodded, following him outside. The courtyard was circular, centered around a single olive tree planted in white stone. Beneath it, engraved in gold, were the words, "To those who loved in silence, may the world finally hear you." Amara traced the words with her fingers, her heart tightening. "It's perfect," she whispered. Thomas studied her expression. "You know," he said carefully, "Lucas would have wanted this. The tree, the message, all of it. It's exactly how he spoke about you, like light hidden under stone." She smiled faintly. "He had a way of seeing what I couldn't yet believe." "Maybe," Thomas said softly. "He still does." Their eyes met for a moment, gentle, respectful, full of unspoken understanding. Amara looked away, not because she was uncomfortable, but because she recognized something delicate taking shape, something she wasn't quite ready to name. A few weeks later, Amara received an invitation to deliver a keynote speech at a global summit in New York about social equity and legacy. She accepted, though part of her wondered if she could still find the words that once came so easily. The night before her flight, she found herself sitting in Lucas's old study. It was exactly as he'd left it, the shelves lined with books on philosophy and business, a few sketches of projects that never came to be. On his desk, she kept a framed photo of the three of them on the beach, the one and only photo where he hadn't hidden her from the world. She picked it up, smiling at his slightly awkward pose, the way his arm curved protectively around her shoulders. "You'd hate how public I've become," she murmured, "but you'd love what came of it." As she turned to leave, her hand brushed against an old drawer she'd never opened. Inside lay a small velvet pouch. She opened it carefully and gasped. It was a pendant, a small glass locket, inside of which was a folded slip of paper. She opened it and found a message written in Lucas's unmistakable handwriting. "If you find this, it means you've kept going. That's all I ever wanted. The world can take everything from us, but it can't take what we build in love. Don't stop building. Amara. She pressed the pendant to her heart, tears slipping down her cheeks. I won't, she whispered. I promise. The summit in New York was held in a grand hall overlooking the Hudson River. Journalists, leaders, and activists filled the room. When Amara took the stage, the applause was immediate, soft, respectful, reverent. She looked out over the crowd, the city lights shimmering behind them. 2 years ago, she began, I stood beside a man who taught me what it means to love courageously and what it costs to hide it. Her voice was calm, but her words cut through the room like light through glass. I spent years believing silence was protection. That love could survive if we just kept it safe. But love doesn't live in silence. It needs air, truth, and sometimes pain to grow. She paused, her gaze softening. My husband's legacy wasn't his company or his wealth. It was the lesson that came after that. Forgiveness is the bridge between who we were and who we're meant to become. The crowd was quiet, listening. She continued, I built the Lila Foundation to honor him. Yes. But I keep it alive to honor every woman who's been told her voice is too small, her story too heavy. We are not broken. We are the light that remains when everything else fades. When she finished, the room erupted into a standing ovation. But Amara didn't hear applause. She heard Lila's laughter, Lucas's voice, the whisper of a promise kept. That evening, after the summit, she walked along the Hudson alone. The wind was cool, carrying the smell of rain. The city glowed behind her, alive and humming. A stranger stopped her, a young woman, maybe 22, holding a worn copy of a magazine that featured Amara on the cover. Are you her? The girl asked shyly. Amara Graham. Amara smiled. Yes, I am. The girl's eyes filled with tears. You don't know me, but your story saved me. I was in an abusive relationship for years. Watching you, seeing you stand tall after everything, it made me leave. It made me believe I could start again. Amara took her hand gently. Then you already did the hardest part. You chose yourself. The girl nodded, sobbing quietly. Thank you. Amara squeezed her hand. One day, you'll be the reason someone else starts over. That's how light works. It passes on. As the girl walked away, Amara looked out at the river, the reflections of the city lights dancing on the surface. The wind lifted her hair, and for just a moment, she swore she felt Lucas beside her, again, warm, silent, proud. You were right, she whispered. Love does outlive everything. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel haunted. She felt whole. When she returned home to Boston, Lila was waiting for her at the door, holding a small handmade card. Welcome home. Mom, I missed you. Amara knelt, hugging her tightly. I missed you too. Sunshine. Lila held up the card. I made this a school. It's you, me, Daddy, and a big light. Amara looked at the drawing, the three of them standing under a golden sun. It's beautiful, baby. What's the light for? Lila beamed. That's love. It never goes away. Remember, Amara's throat tightened. Yes, sweetheart, she whispered. It never does. As she tucked her daughter into bed that night, Amara looked out the window. The stars shimmered faintly through the glass, and somewhere deep inside, she felt peace settle like a quiet sunrise. She knew the journey wasn't over. It never would be, but she no longer feared the road ahead. Because she had learned that even after loss, even after silence and pain and time, what remains is the light we leave in others. And that light, like love, never dies. Billionaire. Never introduced his black wife to his family. What she did at his deathbed isn't just a love story, it's a mirror. It reminds us that silence, no matter how golden it seems, can still break a heart. Lucas's wealth couldn't save him from regret, and Amara's forgiveness became the only legacy that truly mattered. In a world that often values image over honesty, this story asks us to look inward. Who have we hidden out of fear? Whose love have we taken for granted? And how long will we wait to tell the truth before time takes that chance away? Amara's journey teaches that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means freeing yourself from pain that no longer serves you. It's about turning wounds into wisdom, secrets into strength, and heartbreak into healing. Because love, when it's real, outlives loss. It becomes the light we leave behind. So if this story touched something in your heart, remember it's never too late to choose courage over fear, truth over silence, and compassion over pride. Thank you for spending your time with this story. If it moved you, please like, share, and subscribe, because somewhere out there, someone else needs this reminder. Love is still stronger than shame, and forgiveness is still the most powerful kind of freedom.